My name is Audrey Winifred, and a year ago, the thought of being shut out of my daughter's life would have seemed impossible. Corinna, my daughter, had always been a bright spark, warm, lively, and endlessly kind. Over the months, that light faded in ways I could not explain. Phone calls went unanswered, and visits were ignored. Holidays passed without a single message. The silence was steady, deliberate, and painful enough to change how each day felt. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that life was busy, that marriages shift priorities. But deep down, I knew the truth. This was not distance. This was separation. And it did not begin by accident. It began slowly, almost politely, until one day I realized I was no longer part of my own daughter's world. I blamed Alistair, my son-in-law. Corinna married him 10 years ago, and from the start, something about him unsettled me. He valued control, order, and appearances. Over time, I watched my daughter adjust herself around him. Her laughter softened. Her opinions shortened. Her warmth cooled. Whenever I visited, he hovered close, not welcoming, but watchful. He corrected her in front of me, dismissed my stories, and made jokes at my expense until I learned to speak less. Each visit left me smaller than the last. The breaking point came on Christmas Eve. 1 year ago, I brought my mother's apricot crumble, a simple dish passed down through generations. A piece of home. Alistair took one look at it, sniffed, and said Corinna could only eat approved foods. Then, without hesitation, he threw it away, right in front of me. Corinna said nothing. She did not defend me and did not meet my eyes. She stared at the countertop as if silence could protect her. I left that night without a hug and without a goodbye. And after that night, there was nothing. No calls, no notes, no birthdays, no holidays, just absence. I tried reaching out. I called. I wrote letters. I even drove by the house once, only to be turned away by a closed gate and a silent camera. My days settled into a quiet routine built around loss. I told myself I had done everything a mother could. I told myself to let go. Then the email arrived. The subject line read, "Dinner on Saturday." It was addressed to me and my siblings, Gregory and Beatrice, who had also been cut off for months. The message itself was brief and distant. "Audrey, Alistair and I would like to host a small dinner this Saturday at 7 p.m. We feel it is time to move past the recent awkwardness. Please RSVP by tomorrow. Corinna." It did not sound like my daughter. It sounded like a notice. Yet seeing her name stirred something reckless inside me. Hope I knew better. I knew how sudden this was after a year of silence, but hope does not ask permission. It simply rises. I stood in front of my closet, holding a deep sapphire dress Corinna had given me years earlier. My heart felt uneven, torn between excitement and unease. Alistair inviting me back into that house after everything felt wrong. But the thought of seeing my daughter, even for a moment, outweighed every warning. I told myself I would go. I would keep my guard up. I would leave if something felt off. Saturday arrived, wrapped in late autumn fog, the kind that sticks to the skin and dulls sound. I drove through Tanglewood Heights, past neat lawns and quiet homes. The fog softened everything and made the familiar uncertain. When I reached the wrought iron gate of the Sterling estate, I spoke my name into the intercom. The gate opened with a low hum. It did not feel welcoming. It felt final. The house stood large and silent. Only a faint amber light glowed near the entryway. No music and no voices. No other cars. I parked and stepped out, smoothing my dress. The air felt heavy, as if it were holding its breath. I walked the long stone path to the door, raised my hand to knock, and before my knuckles touched the wood, the door opened. That was the moment I knew this night would not follow the path I had imagined. The door swung open slowly, and a small woman appeared in the gap. Her frame was slight, and she had always been quiet, barely looking up when I visited before. I recognized her instantly. Silvana, the maid. Tonight, something in her expression made my pulse skip. Her eyes were wide, darting nervously behind me, and her lips trembled. She barely parted the door, letting only her face poke through. Her voice was urgent and low, almost shaking. "Ma'am Audrey," she whispered, her tone sharp with fear. "Do not go in. Leave now. You must not enter." I froze, unsure if I had misheard, or if the fog and darkness were playing tricks. "Silvana," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "What are you saying?" She glanced quickly over her shoulder, the fear in her posture clear. "They watch everything, Ma'am Audrey. You cannot go inside. If you value your life, leave immediately. Turn around and forget you ever received this invitation." Her words were clipped, desperate, impossible to ignore. A faint, acrid smell reached me, a mixture of rich wine and a metallic sharpness that made my stomach tighten. I realized the scent came from inside the house. It was subtle, but it carried a warning in its heaviness, a signal that danger was close. My senses sharpened. I noticed the fog curling around the front steps, hiding shadows and shapes I could not quite identify. Every instinct in me screamed to obey her warning. I stepped back slowly, heart hammering in my chest. Yet I could not turn away entirely. My daughter was inside. This was Corinna's home, and the thought of leaving her in unknown peril pressed on my mind. Still, the fear in Silvana's face rooted me in place. Then the door clicked as it closed abruptly, the sound startling in the quiet of the night. She had pulled back, vanished behind the solid wood, leaving the faint warmth of the house behind a barrier that felt both protective and threatening. The metallic tang of danger lingered faintly in the air as I stood there, frozen in the fog, unsure of what to do next. Every instinct screamed to run, yet a heavier pull, the pull of love and worry, kept me tethered in place. The silence that followed was heavy. No sounds of a family gathering, no music, no laughter. Only the muffled heartbeat of my own fear and the soft rustle of leaves in the cool air. I realized that I had narrowly escaped entering a situation that could not be ordinary, that could not be safe. I backed away further, feeling the chill creep along my spine. I tried to steady my breathing, to let rational thought guide me, yet the image of Corinna inside, possibly in danger, weighed on me. The door, now shut, seemed to mock the hesitation in me, reminding me that time to act would not wait. The fog swirled more thickly, blurring the path back to my car, forcing me to focus on each careful step. I held my purse close, my hand brushing the phone inside, ready for anything. Every instinct told me to leave immediately, to obey Silvana's warning. Yet my mind could not let go of the questions burning in me. What was waiting behind that door? What had prompted this desperate caution? Why would she risk everything to stop me? I pressed my back against the shadows near the gate, trying to remain unseen, and peered around the corner to glance at the mansion one last time. The amber light, spilling faintly from the entryway, revealed nothing but stillness, yet the tension radiating from the unseen interior promised that whatever awaited inside was far from ordinary. The weight of Silvana's words pressed down on me again. If I valued my life, I could not step forward. Every fiber of me recognized the cliffhanger of that moment. I had been given a choice: ignore the warning and risk everything, or trust the frightened maid and retreat into uncertainty. My heart raced as I realized the night was only beginning, and that one decision here could change everything. I could not leave. Every instinct screamed danger, yet the thought of my daughter inside, possibly trapped, forced my feet to remain. I moved cautiously around the side of the car, using it as a shield from view, and crept closer to the garden. The dense fog wrapped around me, softening sounds and hiding my movement. Each step was deliberate, slow, as I pressed myself behind a thick cluster of yew bushes, their dark trunks offering cover and the damp leaves brushing my sleeves. From this vantage, I could see the great room clearly. The floor-to-ceiling glass walls that once reflected the world now became a window into a scene I was not prepared to witness. The soft amber lighting that usually welcomed guests suddenly flared to brilliant intensity, flooding the room in harsh light. The effect was immediate and almost theatrical. Shadows that had been hiding the furniture vanished, and everything inside was exposed as if the walls themselves were revealing a performance meant for a select audience. My heart pounded as I took in the arrangement. The large dining table was laid with exquisite china and silverware, yet only 3 chairs were set. One at the head, one to the right, and one directly opposite. The symmetry was unsettling. At the head of the table stood Alistair, perfectly composed in a dark suit that seemed to absorb the light around him. His posture was rigid, and his hands clasped behind his back, the sharp lines of his jaw and cold gaze making him appear more predator than host. To his right sat Corinna, my daughter. She looked fragile, thinner than I remembered. Her hair carefully styled but lacking its usual liveliness. Her hands were tightly clasped in her lap, and her eyes avoided everything but the polished surface of the table. There was no warmth, no casual conversation. Her posture was rigid, almost as if she were bracing herself for a punishment. My chest tightened as I realized she was not merely sitting, she was waiting, constrained and tense. Then a third figure entered, a man I did not know, bulky, bald, dressed in a suit that fit poorly and gave the impression of being borrowed for the evening. He carried a heavy leather satchel and moved directly to the third chair. Alistair made no attempt to welcome him, no nod of civility, no offer of drink. He simply gestured, commanding his presence like an order, rather than an invitation. The unknown man set his bag down and began unpacking equipment. My eyes widened as I saw what it contained: a professional camera on a tripod, lenses and accessories that belonged in a photographer's studio. He assembled the equipment with efficiency, directing the lens toward Corinna, the head chair, and the one across from her. My stomach dropped as the realization hit me. This was not a casual dinner. This was being documented, staged, captured. Alistair moved toward the side table and picked up a small, familiar object. My locket, the one I had given Corinna for her 16th birthday, containing a tiny photograph of her father and me. My fingers clenched instinctively, heart sinking, and next to it, deliberately laid as if part of the scene, was a long, thin carving knife. I could not breathe. The locket, the knife, and the camera, everything was orchestrated to intimidate, to manipulate, to frame. I pressed myself further into the shadow of the bushes, the damp leaves cold against my skin, the fog swirling like a curtain hiding my presence. Corinna flinched slightly as Alistair's hand moved with authority, seizing her wrist. I saw the sharp inhale of breath from her lips, a silent gasp that made my stomach churn. The subtle wrist lift revealed a thin bracelet, an electronic monitor of some kind. Alistair's control extended beyond threats. He was tracking her movements, containing her freedom. The photographer began taking shots, adjusting the focus, capturing every detail. The locket, the knife, Corinna's restrained hands, the tension in her body. Alistair watched over her like a hawk, arms folded, expression hard and unyielding. The weight of it all settled over me in waves of disbelief and rising anger. I saw Corinna attempt a subtle gesture, a tiny shake of her head toward the man. It was almost imperceptible, yet it carried desperation. Alistair noticed immediately, and his hand came down sharply on the table, forcing her to wince. Then he released her wrist, picked up the locket, and held it with casual menace. The knife remained on the table, a silent threat in plain view. Every detail was deliberate. Every movement was designed to intimidate and control. My mind raced, connecting what I had seen with Silvana's warning. The maid's terror had not been imagined. It was proof that the danger inside was real and targeted. Corinna's confinement, Alistair's cold authority, the staged scene, all pointed to something deeply calculated. The horror of it pressed into my chest, yet beneath it, a spark of determination began to grow. I knew I had to act with caution, moving too early, making noise, drawing attention I could jeopardize my daughter. Yet staying hidden and observing provided a wealth of information I could use. Every click of the camera, every flicker of emotion on Corinna's face, every rigid motion of Alistair's hands was a piece of the puzzle. As the photographs continued, my resolve hardened. This was not a situation where blind intervention could succeed. This was a puzzle to solve, a danger to mitigate, and a daughter to protect. The night was dark, the fog thick, yet I felt the fire of urgency burning hotter with every passing second. Corinna's eyes flickered toward the camera again, and I understood that she was aware of my presence, aware that someone might see, someone might come. The scene unfolded like a cruel demonstration of control and fear. And I knew it would take every ounce of patience, every scrap of ingenuity I possessed to rescue her. Yet even in that tense, frightening tableau, I felt a grandmother's instinct sharpen. I would watch. I would wait. And when the moment was right, I would move, striking with precision to protect the one person who mattered most. Every shadow, every light reflection, every movement in that glass room spoke volumes. Alistair's arrogance was on full display, and his overconfidence would be his undoing. For now, I remained hidden, observing the layers of manipulation, cruelty, and control, counting each second until the right action could be taken. The photographs continued, each snap reinforcing the severity of the threat and the urgency of intervention. The pieces fit together in my mind like a grim puzzle, each detail snapping into place with shocking clarity. The invitation itself was the first sign of danger, dressed as civility. The sudden, abrupt call after a year of silence seemed generous, almost apologetic, yet the tone was carefully neutral, like a corporate email rather than a daughter reaching out to her mother. Corinna's words were measured, safe, and contained. There was no warmth, no apology for the months of absence, no recognition of the hurt Alistair had caused. The lack of emotion in the message became the first hint that the dinner might not be about reconciliation at all. Then the layout of the table, the harsh lighting, the 3 chairs, everything became clear. The dinner was not meant to welcome me. It was a trap. Alistair had designed the room to control the narrative and the participants. 1 chair for him, 1 for Corinna, and the last one for the person he expected to walk in unaware me. Every prop had a purpose. The knife, the locket, the camera were all tools meant to intimidate, manipulate, and create evidence that could be twisted to incriminate me. He was not hosting a family dinner. He was constructing a scenario, a story in which I would be the antagonist. My siblings were another piece of the puzzle. The invitation had been sent to them too, distant enough not to arrive on time, far enough to be neutral observers, yet unable to intervene effectively. Their absence would leave me isolated, vulnerable, easy to frame. The timing was precise, the setup flawless from Alistair's perspective. This was his plan to ensure that if anything went wrong, he could point to a clear, unmistakable culprit. I was supposed to arrive, see the scene, react in fear or anger, and unwittingly place myself at the center of his scheme. The locket stirred memories, but also revealed intent. It was personal, intimate, a piece of me placed in the scene to strengthen the illusion of motive. Alongside the carving knife, the message was unambiguous. Audrey Winifred was the intended target. The inclusion of the camera confirmed it was not about Corinna alone. Alistair wanted evidence, photographs to manipulate perception, to create a narrative in which I was guilty before the world ever heard a word. Every gesture, every placement, every calculated detail pointed directly at me as the central figure in his plan. And Corinna herself, sitting so rigid and restrained, was a stark revelation. The thin bracelet on her wrist caught the light in a way that confirmed my fears. She was monitored, contained, not merely compliant, but forced into a position of helplessness. My daughter was trapped under Alistair's control, her movements restricted, her communication observed, her autonomy stripped. The terror I had seen in her posture now made sense. She had been performing a delicate act of survival, holding herself in place while he orchestrated the event around her. It was not a simple matter of fear. It was control, surveillance, and coercion in plain view. A wave of anger replaced the shock and fear that had gripped me when I first saw the scene. Every insult, every humiliation over the years, every slight or dismissal came into focus as part of a broader pattern. Alistair had been preparing this for a long time, ensuring that any attempt to intervene would appear reckless or unstable. My rage was not just maternal, it was the moral outrage of someone who had been cornered, manipulated, and underestimated. He had made a critical error in assuming I would be passive, assuming fear alone could hold me in place. I thought of Silvana's warning and the courage it had taken to speak, even in hushed whispers. That voice had been a lifeline, a signal of the reality I now understood completely. Without her intervention, I would have walked straight into the trap, becoming exactly what Alistair had intended. The weight of that realization ignited a determination that left no room for hesitation. Fear had done its job, but now clarity demanded action. I could not allow him to succeed. I could not allow him to compromise my daughter, nor could I allow him to manipulate me into becoming a pawn in his scheme. I resolved to act with precision. Running blindly would accomplish nothing. Intervening recklessly would endanger both of us. Instead, observation and patience became my tools. Each moment outside the house, a chance to gather information, each shadowed step, a means of ensuring the next move would count. Alistair's arrogance, his belief that he had control over every variable, became my leverage. He had underestimated the resourcefulness of a mother and grandmother who had spent a lifetime assessing, guiding, and protecting. I would turn his overconfidence into his downfall. By the time I slipped behind the safety of my car, the fog heavy and the night quiet, the plan in my mind was clear. I would not simply react. I would anticipate. I would uncover the pieces of his operation and dismantle them one by one. Corinna would be free, and the trap Alistair had so carefully laid would collapse under the weight of the truth. My fear had been justified, the danger real, but the clarity of the plan transformed it into resolve. I was no longer a potential victim. I was a strategist, watching, waiting, and preparing to reclaim the night, my daughter, and our lives. From the man who thought he could control everything, I waited in the shadows near the service entrance, the quiet of the street pressing in around me. The fog curled around the street lamps, blurring the edges of the estate, masking my presence. Every car that passed made my heart skip a beat. I had promised myself I would not be caught unaware again, and the world outside the mansion had to remain my ally until I could act. Time was precious, and I could feel it slipping like sand through my fingers. At 925, the small side door opened. Silvana emerged, moving quickly, her frame tense and hunched as if she carried the weight of the night on her shoulders. Her face, when she glimpsed me, shifted through relief, fear, and disbelief all at once. I stepped closer, careful not to startle her. "Silvana," I whispered, my voice low and steady. She froze, clutched her worn handbag tightly, and looked at me as if the sight of a familiar face alone could be dangerous. She had clearly been rehearsing every movement, every precaution, for hours. "You didn't leave," she said, her voice trembling. The words barely reached me over the pounding of my own heart. I reached for her elbow gently, guiding her away from the property, away from the danger that might be watching us through hidden cameras or over the estate walls. "I couldn't leave you or Corinna," I said. "You risked yourself for me tonight, and I need to know everything. Every detail matters now." Her voice broke as she finally began to speak. "He does this all the time," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Corinna has to sign papers, contracts, forms. He watches her calls, her messages. If I say anything, he will ruin my family. They live overseas, and he can make sure they never get visas again. He knows everything about us, where we are, where we go." She looked down, her fingers nervously twisting the strap of her bag. I listened in silence, my chest tightening as the reality sank in. Alistair's reach was extensive, his threats precise. Every smile, every polite word over the past year had been calculated to isolate and control. And yet, here was Silvana, a small, weary woman, risking everything to speak the truth. Her courage sparked a fire in me, a determination that grew stronger with every word. "And tonight," she continued, her voice choked. "The man with the camera, the knife, the locket. It was a trap. He planned to drug Corinna, make it seem like she had been attacked. And he expected you to walk right in, to react, and then the police would find you with the knife over her. They would have said you were desperate, unstable. You would have been blamed for everything." She shuddered at the memory, pressing the bag closer to her chest. I could feel my pulse quicken. The danger suddenly tangible. This was not hypothetical. This was real, immediate, and horrifying. "Insurance," she added, her voice barely audible. "He has made Corinna take out life policies. High value. If she dies, he collects. If you are seen here, he has a way to blame you and cover his tracks. Everything is timed, every detail is planned. He needs the setup perfect because his business is failing. Bankruptcy looms, and this is his solution, a way to regain wealth at any cost." I swallowed hard. The depth of his manipulation, the cold calculation, was staggering. He had constructed not only a trap, but a story, a scenario to cover every possible variable. The family, the authorities, the social circle all would see only what he wanted them to see. And my daughter, trapped and restrained, would be the pawn in his plan. Rage mixed with fear, creating a focus sharper than any fear alone could achieve. "You understand now," she said, finally meeting my eyes. "Why I spoke. Why I had to risk everything just to warn you. He will know if I return. He will watch. He will act. You must act fast, Ma'am Audrey. If you wait, if you hesitate, everything will fall apart." Her voice was both fragile and urgent, the tension in her body telling me the gravity of the situation. I nodded, taking in the full picture. The stakes were clear. This was not a distant threat. This was a ticking clock, and the lives involved, mine and my daughter's, depended on swift, careful action. The layers of deceit, the planned framing, the financial desperation, all combined to create a perfect storm that demanded precision in response. Any mistake, any delay, and Alistair's scheme could succeed. I handed her cash, enough for a cab, enough to disappear for the night. "Go now," I said. "Do not return to the usual routes. Go to a hotel, somewhere public, somewhere busy. Call me in the morning from a public phone. Trust only me until this is over." Her lips quivered, and she nodded, finally moving away, blending into the fog as she disappeared from sight. As she left, I stayed low, sliding back into my car, heart hammering but mind racing. Alistair's errors had been clear. He believed fear would make me passive. He believed the night would end with me trapped and helpless. He had not accounted for observation, preparation, or a will to protect and to fight. The stage was set, and now I knew exactly how I would act. The trap had been revealed, the players identified, and the path forward illuminated. I would not allow him to control the outcome. Corinna would be free, and Alistair would face the consequences of his own overconfidence. I did not drive home after Silvana vanished into the fog. I followed the cab at a careful distance, far enough not to draw attention, close enough to be certain she reached a place where crowds and light would shield her. When the cab stopped outside a large downtown hotel, I watched her disappear through the glass doors before turning away. Only then did I allow myself a slow breath. One life was safer for the night. That mattered. Back in my car, I sat with the engine off, hands resting on the wheel, letting my thoughts line up. Fear had done its job earlier. It had warned me, sharpened my senses, kept me alive. Now it stepped aside. In its place came something steadier, something forged over decades of responsibility and difficult decisions. I was done reacting. From this moment on, I would be directing events. People often mistake age for softness. They see grey hair and slower steps and assume compliance. They forget that time also brings pattern recognition, patience, and an intolerance for bullies who believe money makes them untouchable. For 35 years, I had been a school principal. I had handled false accusations, manipulative parents, charming liars, and quiet victims who did not know how to ask for help. I had learned that the loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. Documentation is power. Witnesses are power. Timing is power. I drove to my small townhouse and went straight to my desk. I did not change out of my dress. I wanted the night to stay sharp in my mind. I opened my laptop and began a list, not of emotions, but of leverage. Assets, insurance, reputation, networks. Alistair Sterling lived by numbers and appearances. That would be the language of his undoing. The insurance policies came first. Silvana had given me the thread, and I knew exactly how to pull it. High-value policies with narrow conditions always raise flags, especially when clustered and recently opened. Insurers may enjoy profit, but they despise deception. A credible tip, delivered calmly and supported by evidence, could freeze payouts before Alistair ever touched a cent. Next came his finances. Real estate developers do not collapse quietly. They borrow, reshuffle, delay, and posture. Somewhere beneath the confident exterior would be loans stacked on optimism and silence. All I needed was a reason for auditors to look closer. Once eyes were on him, the pressure would do the rest. Then there was reputation. Alistair thrived in rooms where deals were sealed with smiles and shared secrets. Those rooms had rules. Abuse was tolerated only as long as it stayed hidden. The moment it threatened public scandal, loyalty evaporated. I would not shout accusations. I would let concerned questions circulate among the very people he relied on for validation. I reached for my phone and checked the time. Late, but not too late. Some professionals never truly clock out. I dialed my lawyer, Henry Harrington, a man who had once represented the school district during a particularly ugly legal battle. He answered on the fourth ring. "Henry," I said, my voice even, "I need your full attention. This is urgent." I laid out the situation carefully. No dramatics. No speculation. Only what I had seen, what Silvana had confirmed, and what could be verified quickly. A coerced spouse. Surveillance. A staged setup. Potential insurance fraud. a credible witness in immediate danger. I could hear the shift on the other end of the line as Henry moved from listening to calculating. "I want an emergency injunction," I said. "Asset freeze, restricted access to Corinna pending evaluation, and I want contact made with the insurers by Monday morning." Quietly, professionally, there was a pause. Then, "Audrey," he said, "this is serious." "Yes," I replied. "That is why I am calling you and not the police. Not yet." When the call ended, I did not feel relief. I felt momentum. I opened a secure folder and began drafting a timeline. Dates, incidents, witnesses, Silvana's schedule, the email invitation, the absence of my siblings. Every piece mattered, not as drama, but as structure. Lies collapse fastest when confronted with order. Before going to bed, I made one final call. A former colleague, now working in a regulatory office connected to financial oversight. I did not accuse, I asked for advice, hypothetical questions framed carefully. The response I received told me everything I needed to know. If I presented the right information, doors would open. As dawn crept in, I finally allowed myself to sit back. Alistair believed control came from intimidation and isolation. He had never faced someone who understood systems as well as people. He had built his life on dominance and secrecy. I was about to introduce him to transparency and consequences. This was not about revenge in the dramatic sense. It was about correction. About removing a predator from the position he abused. About restoring my daughter's right to breathe without permission. The pieces were in motion now, and I would not rush them. The most effective consequences arrive calmly, dressed as procedure, and backed by truth. By the time the sun rose fully, I had already won the most important victory. I was no longer afraid, and Alistair Sterling had no idea what was coming. By Monday morning, the first messages had been sent. Legal notices quietly arrived at Alistair's offices, confirming an emergency freeze on accounts and assets. The insurers responded promptly to a carefully worded tip, pausing any pending claims linked to Corinna. The network of control he relied on began to wobble, subtly at first, then more noticeably. Alistair was accustomed to people moving at his pace. Now, the pace was dictated by procedures he could not influence. Audrey watched the unfolding events from her desk, coffee in hand. Every email, every phone call, every confirmation of action was another step toward restoring balance. She felt no triumph in cruelty, only satisfaction in justice. The man who sought to manipulate and intimidate through fear was now bound by rules that could not be ignored. He had underestimated a grandmother who refused to be sidelined. Corinna, freed from constant observation and subtle coercion, began to breathe in ways she had not for years. The alert bracelet, once a symbol of confinement, was removed by professionals under safe supervision. Audrey accompanied her daughter to the offices handling the insurance policies, ensuring each step followed legal safeguards. Each smile, tentative at first, was a reminder that love and vigilance could protect and heal. Social circles that had once unquestioningly accepted Alistair's authority started to murmur. Questions asked politely at events or during meetings grew in intensity as financial advisors, business partners, and acquaintances realized irregularities could no longer be hidden. The carefully curated image of control and wealth began to fracture under scrutiny. Reputation, once his tool of dominance, now worked against him. Audrey did not gloat. She simply maintained vigilance, checking in with Silvana, ensuring her safety remained intact. She coordinated with legal counsel, confirming every document and every claim had proper verification. The pace was deliberate, methodical, and precise. She knew that real consequences often required patience, observation, and timing. Rushing could undo the careful scaffolding she had built. In private moments, Audrey reflected on the year of silence, the humiliation, and the fear. It was replaced now by clarity and purpose. She had not only protected her daughter, but had reclaimed a role she had feared lost. A mother, a grandmother, and a guide in a world that often undervalued caution and intelligence. The house that once threatened to trap both Corinna and herself was no longer an instrument of fear. By midweek, confirmations arrived that the insurers would conduct a full internal review. Alistair's financial overseers were reviewing recent transactions. Social attention had shifted to subtle inquiries that he could not ignore. Corinna walked freely, her confidence rebuilding with every careful step. The darkness that had once filled their home and hearts had lifted, replaced with safety and measured trust. Audrey finally allowed herself to exhale fully. Justice had been achieved not through confrontation, but through strategy, vigilance, and the careful application of knowledge. The chain of events had restored freedom to her daughter, protection to Silvana, and peace to herself. She had acted decisively, and the results were unfolding exactly as needed. In the quiet reflection of her study, with the morning sun spilling across the desk, she felt the quiet satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly and lives reclaimed from fear. Looking back, I realize how easy it was to underestimate what experience can see and do. Years of observation, careful thinking, and knowing human nature allowed me to act while others hesitated. Life teaches lessons quietly, but insists they are noticed if we pay attention. A small warning, a whispered caution, or a sudden change in tone can signal that something is very wrong. It is easy to dismiss these signs until it is almost too late. We have all encountered moments that feel minor at first, yet carry hidden significance. Perhaps a friend seems unusually tense, or a family member behaves in ways that are inconsistent with their usual self. Trust your instincts, question gently, and observe with care. Awareness is a shield, and action guided by reason can prevent harm before it escalates. For those of us who have walked many paths, the years are a library of lessons. The quiet power of vigilance, patience, and thoughtful strategy often outweighs brute force. Even when danger seems overwhelming, calm observation and measured action create opportunities others might not see. Our experience is not just for ourselves, but for those we protect and guide. If this story resonates, consider subscribing to the channel. We share moments like these, not to scare, but to equip, to show that wisdom and careful attention can make all the difference. And if you choose not to subscribe, take a moment in the comments to share why. We are building a community of careful watchers, thoughtful planners, and those who understand that the strength of age is not weakness, but quiet, relentless power. Together, we notice, we act, and we protect. The world may rush past, but we move with awareness and care.